Welcome to the Read Your Keys podcast. I am your host, Joel Lopez. If you're enjoying the content, please like, squish, smash, and subscribe to those like and follow buttons. I'm on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. And today I have the lovely Ginger as a guest today. You can find her on Twitter at HandyGingerGal. And you can find her on YouTube, A Ginger in the Wild, and Play It Again with Mike and Ginger. This is the first time I've had a YouTube star on here. Welcome today, Ginger.
People keep calling me YouTube star. It really just doesn't feel like that.
It's just funny. Like you have because you have over 60,000 subscribers on the Mike and Ginger, the reaction one. That's a lot of subscribers.
It's blowing my mind every single day how big that channel just blew up. And it's only been just over a year since we had it.
What is it that you think that's like just like catching people's attention like that?
My husband Mike likes to say that the draw is all me, right? Because he's just the stoic, steady guy, sits in the corner and occasionally nods his head, right? But I have all the saucy comments and a little bit of boob never hurts, right? So
Doesn't hurt, no.
he likes to say that's why. But a lot of our commenters make comments about how nice it is, like our dynamic, right? The way we talk to each other and how kind of open and affectionate we are with each other, and just we try to keep it a very positive vibe on that channel, because a lot of reaction, like it's music reactions, right? So
You're right.
A lot of music reactions channels like to do more controversial things, or they'll tear up the music or make fun of it and stuff, right?
Yeah.
We try real hard not to do that, just because it's somebody else's hard work,
Right.
and everybody has their own music taste. And even if it's not something that's generally something we really like, we can certainly appreciate the talent that it takes to put yourself out there like that. And I can't play any instruments, so I can't really criticize.
Right. I guess maybe that's some of the other people, right? They have that musical background, and so there's that hater.
Could
and then
be.
it's like, oh, it could have been
Sometimes
me
people
instead.
just do it because it gets viral clicks, right?
Yeah.
They just like to be jerks, because jerk sells sometimes.
It does.
We see that, right?
I do.
But
I tweet it. I tweet jerkily every now and then, but I do it more for like just for the laughs for on my end.
Good-natured ribbing is not being a jerk. That's one of the reasons that I like you. That's one of the reasons we're friends, because we can do the good-natured ribbing.
There's a little bit of ribbing there. What I always wondered what goes into you picking the music. Is it like hey, somebody makes a recommendation, or like,
so
hey,
we have a couple different kind of streams. We have a playlist called Attack of the Algorithm. So when YouTube makes a suggestion for a video, sometimes if the thumbnail or the title looks interesting, we'll just click on it randomly. We've discovered quite a few bands that way. It's been very cool. The algorithm, actually, even though I'm a notorious like robophobe and technophobe, the algorithm is very, very good at picking my brain. So it makes good suggestions. But now that we have so many subscribers now, we get hundreds of suggestions a day. And sometimes we'll pick them, depends on the mood I'm in, if the name of the song sounds intriguing, or the person who suggests it is somebody who's suggested really good things before, right? So it's a whole variety of things. And sometimes we'll just pick a band we like and something we haven't heard before, right?
I think one of them that was cool that I saw was one that your daughter-in-law, your new daughter-in-law had picked for you. I forgot who it was, but I thought
It's
it was
Juan
cool.
Gabriel.
It was the Juan Gabriel. Yeah. So I thought, I was like, oh, this is really cool, because it's like, different. Like you would never have picked it, and it was to show affection to her, like, hey, welcome to the family kind of thing too. So I thought it was kind of cool on multiple ends.
Well, I think that was from like the 70s or something. So it was like so old. I couldn't believe I hadn't come across it before. We actually did another Juan Gabriel song yesterday too.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah.
That's your man now? Or I mean, one of your
my
guys.
husband loves that dude. He just loves how cool and suave he is. He just loves him. Yeah, he's great.
My generation was Julio Iglesias, so he was big when I was a kid.
I used to love him.
Yeah. I remember for some reason I took a Julio Iglesias record to school. For something, it was like he had to like take it, and like my friends saw it and they started making fun of me. It's like, who the hell? Because it was like big sideburns, and I think he had the bald spot on the back of his head. And so like all my friends were all like rapping hip hop, and we were like in junior
Oh,
high at the time, and it was like, who the hell is this guy, man? Is this your uncle? I was like, nah, man, it's Julio Iglesias. Stop messing with him.
he was so cool. I loved Julio Iglesias. I really like Latin singers in general, right? They have really good voices, and I love the sound of the language, so it's very
I'm actually the
cool.
opposite. I don't really care. I don't really care for it. I don't listen to it.
Oh,
I'm really like R&B and rap. That's pretty much like my whole thing. And then now, I don't even really listen to music pretty much at all for the most part. Just
wow.
whenever I go to church is like pretty much like whatever I listen to. And now it's like that kind of music, because now I listen to the music that I listened to as a teen. It's like I
Mm,
can't listen to this with the kids in the car. This is
no.
crazy. Like no way, no way. So it's really interesting to be like, oh, I really like this music as a kid, but I don't want that for my kids, because they shouldn't be listening. I should have been listening to that. Like, and then so
I learned a
there's
very
a.
valuable lesson about that when my eldest son, he's 27 now, when he was just little, he's super little, just starting
Hmm.
to talk, right? And I'm a big fan of industrial music, right?
Hmm.
So I had Rage Against the Machine on in the car,
Hmm.
right? The Killing in the Name of.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so you're
Uh-huh.
familiar with the lyrics
Yeah.
of that?
Yeah.
He starts
Uh.
singing along in the
Yeah.
back seat of the car. I'm like, oh, he's like
Oh.
two.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, it's time to be a parent now.
Yeah, and they pick up on everything. It's amazing. Like you're like the thing that you think, oh, they didn't hear that. Like nope, they heard
Oh,
that,
they hear
and
it.
they're gonna
Oh,
repeat it
yeah.
later on when they're playing with the little Tonka toy, whatever. It's like blah, blah.
So I admit I was never really great about that. I have a bit of a sailor mouth. So my kids heard a lot of cuss words. That's one of my vices, sadly. I always tried real hard, but sometimes when you bang your thumb with a hammer, the expletive
Hmm.
has to fly.
And that's another thing that you do is the handy. Where did that come from? Were you always kind of like? Did you always like working with your hands?
Yeah.
I know like you before, it was kind of interesting because you kind of posted pictures like you're kind of like the ugly duckling, and then you kind of changed, and then so were you kind of a tomboy when growing up, that you
Oh,
just kind
yeah.
of gravitated to that kind of those kind of things?
Yeah, always a tomboy. I always liked climbing and digging and making this. I stole my brother's Lego all the time. Like I wasn't really much into the girly toys so much. I mean, I liked playing with things like Barbies. I had friends that had Barbies, but I didn't have any of my own. But my brother's Lego was my favorite toy,
Hmm.
right? Like I would steal that all the time. So that was where it started, I guess. But I come from a whole family of handy people, right? Like my
Hmm.
grandfather is an amazing everything, right? Like there's
Hmm.
nothing he can't build. And I've always really admired him. He's still alive, but
Oh, nice.
he's a very hard worker. He's always been the kind of person that just sort of figures things out and makes it whatever he needs. So my
That's
family is
interesting.
like that.
Your dad and your brothers were all very handy also.
My dad's pretty handy. Less so now as he's gotten older. He likes to relax more now. But
Hmm.
he was always pretty handy when I was young. He didn't really teach me much, because he doesn't have a lot of patience.
Hmm.
Right. And I inherited some of that. For a long time, I didn't have a lot of patience either. It took a long time to kind of groom me into more patience. So he didn't teach me very often just because he would get frustrated with what he was
Yeah.
doing and then hammers would start flying. So it's never a
Yeah.
good idea to be around when dad was working on something. But I still kind of inherited the desire, I guess.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Well,
because I
my
mean,
my brother not so much.
no, is he younger?
Yes, he's
Okay.
4 years younger than me.
Because yeah, I'm not handy at all. So it's like you're talking about like tech and stuff. It's like oh, I'm not handy with technology. But are you handy? Are you handy? It's like no, not that either. So it's like I don't know how I've made it this far. Like not handy in either
Can you
way.
change your own tire?
You know what? I wasn't until my 30s until I had to change my own tire.
Oh,
It
but you
was
did
that
it.
long. I did it, but I had
That's
I had
good.
to I had to YouTube it.
I've learned almost everything I know from YouTube.
Sometimes when they don't, they have those talks about like you're not a real man kind of things on Twitter. Like I always feel like it's like guys just kind of like do the thing and then then they tweet it like I weighed myself one time and I was like 201 pounds, and I was like, you're not a real man until you weigh 200 pounds, because it's like I barely met the threshold. So like sometimes I'm like joking about like myself, like I'm not making fun of anyone. It's like, oh, I just did this thing. Oh, I just bench pressed 225 like one time, barely, like I needed help. It's like, you're not a man until you can bench press 225. And so I feel like that's a lot of like what Twitter is. Like, I just did this thing, or I'm a man because I can do this thing, and that makes me a man. And the things that I can't do, that's okay. It's not relevant, because the things I can't do, those are the things that make me a man.
I have this conflict a lot when it comes to things that are feminine, or
Uh-huh.
what women are supposed to be like, because I don't fit any of those roles, not properly, right? Like I fit slot into each of them a little bit, right?
Mhm.
But a lot of my other things conflict with them, right? Like I'm wearing a flowery dress right now. This is
Mhm.
common for me, right? I like
Mhm.
the real feminine look, high heels
Mhm.
everywhere,
Yeah.
but also then I'll throw on a pair of jeans and get under the car and change the brakes, right?
Yeah.
So I get this conflict a lot with, especially on Twitter, with some people that really feel the need to shoehorn people into roles, right?
Which is strange to me. It's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
you like what you like. It's not harming anybody. And I'm not quite a live and let live person.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have like I say this quite a bit. Like, in matters of taste, like, do what you want. In matters of values, that's where like you're not gonna move me, and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. So like, if you like, whatever kind of music, whatever, like, I don't care. Um, oh, I think this is kind of what it comes down to me. Like, I can hang out with pretty much anybody, like any man, as long as he treats his wife or girlfriend well,
Mm-hmm.
and if he has kids, if he treats them well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if another man badmouths his wife or his girlfriend, it's like, no, I'm not hanging out with you. Like, that's kind of like I just don't want to be around you. We could have a lot in common. You could be like, like a sense of humor. Like, I like being around funny people. Like, to me, that's like one of
Mm-hmm.
like the, hey, you can do a lot of things, but if you're funny, like, oh, that kind of washes over stuff, because you can make me laugh. Like, that's like, I really enjoy that. But
Yeah.
if you're bad mouthing your wife or girlfriend, like, no, it's not worth it to me. I don't want my wife around or my kids around someone who's like that. That's just a non-negotiable for me.
I'm the same way when it comes to women. This is a big reason why I don't have a lot of female friends, because it's very common among a lot of the women I know to to trash their husbands, like constantly complain about them, right? How
Mm-hmm.
dumb they are or how useless they are. And
Yeah.
that's one of those things that makes me actually really angry. I want
Mm-hmm.
to shake them and say, "Do you have any idea how bad that makes you look?" Not
Yeah.
only that you'll say it out loud,
Mm-hmm.
but that you'll think it, but you're still with this person. You chose him,
You chose him. That's the one that gets me. You chose him, stupid. Right? Like,
right?
like, you're complaining about this person that you decided to spend the rest of your life with,
Yeah.
and you're bad mouthing him. So like,
Yeah.
to me, like, I don't.
And I know if they're
I.
doing it in front of me, they're doing it in front of their kids too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of those traits that I just cannot tolerate either. I get really,
Yeah.
really angry about it. And anybody that's like that, immediately I'm just like, I'm not going to spend any more time with these people. I'm the same way.
Yeah, it's just, well, I don't think it's enjoyable, because it's like, well, like, say you're having a good time, and it's just like, ugh, like,
Well, some
that
women
doesn't sit right
enjoy
with me.
doing it with each other because they commiserate, right? Oh,
Uh-huh.
they all have these useless husbands and they commiserate about how they
Mm-hmm.
feel like they're their husband's mother. And I'm
Uh-huh.
like, well, either he's not really like that and you're just saying it for what, sympathy, or
Or just to
so you
kind of
look
like
like a
fit
hero?
in, or fit into the
Yeah.
conversation, to
Or he
complain.
really
Yeah.
is like that and you made some very bad choices. And don't get me wrong, I can't criticize bad choices because I'm on husband number three.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm familiar with what it's like to not make good choices. But one thing I never did was bitch about it and stay,
Uh-huh.
right? Like, if,
Did you? That's just something I'd like to actually talk about, because like,
mhm.
the relationship that you have with Mike, it's very sweet. Like, how long you guys have been married? A good 10 years now? Yeah,
It's
somewhere.
11, 11 years.
Nice, nice.
Yeah, thank you.
And usually it's like, you hear like, okay, marriage, it doesn't get better normally for most people. It's like they
Mm,
kind of go, but Mike seems like you guys, you know. you can put what you want on social media, but like sometimes like, you can't fake this. And like if you watch their channel with the interaction, it's like, oh, there's a general like sweetness that you can't fake that. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like
yeah.
you can pretend or stuff, but they like I watch people, like I think most people do, and like
Hmm.
you can't fake what you two have. Like just those in the the way that you guys look at each other in the small in those little things you can see like, oh, there's a genuine, you know, affection for sure, but the sweetness that kind of underlying that goes with it, it's like, oh, they make things work when they argue because you can
Hmm.
just see the affection. There's a grace that a couple has to give to each other to know like, hey, you're not, you know, you're not perfect, I'm not perfect, and we're okay with it, and we're gonna take each other as we are. Like you can see
Hmm.
all of that in just like the small interactions, and then plus like you know
Oh,
you
that's
see things on
sweet.
Twitter, yeah. So, but it took a while to get to find that, right? For you,
Oh, yeah.
what were some of those things that you needed to kind of work through to be able to?
It was all me.
Okay, so let me go back because I heard your podcast with Dev,
Yeah,
and that you
okay.
had met your husband before.
Yeah.
So
Okay. So that's
go
a
ahead.
this is a long story. Um, yeah, actually, so when I first left my first husband, who was very abusive, and I had a very small baby, that was my son, my eldest son, Julian, with me. I I had a friend that I had dated in high school that we were still friends, and he needed a date for a wedding. So he asked me because he didn't have a girlfriend at the time, and I was single, and oh, okay, I'll go with you. But the wedding was for a lady that he went to college with, and he used to carpool with my husband Mike to college. They used to carpool together, so they were all friends. They were both invited to the wedding. So we decided to carpool with Mike and his wife to this wedding. So that was my first time meeting him. We only spent the day together, like the four of us, during this wedding, but for most of that time, his wife at the time is one of those women that
Hmm.
did nothing but complain about him all the time, right in front of me. Like I'm a total
Hmm.
stranger. So
Yeah.
she knew the gent that I went to the wedding with, so she was familiar with him, but I was a complete stranger. She just met me that day. And the number of times I heard her call her husband right in front of him stupid or
Oof.
dumb or making like just making
Hmm.
fun of him, I
Hmm.
couldn't believe my ears.
Hmm.
It was really irritating, and I started to get snipey by the end of the day. I gotta be honest. I don't think we made friends. But
Hmm.
and him, I felt sorry for him, and also kept wondering why he was putting up with it. Right? Like I
Hmm.
would have never tolerated that. But he's
Yeah.
literally the textbook stoic, right? Like he just lets stuff wash over him.
Hmm.
Most stuff doesn't even bother him. He's just like whatever.
Uh-huh.
So that was it. We hadn't met again, and then it was 9 years later, and I used to write a political blog. I was really into blogging actually quite a bit in politics, and but it was anonymous. I didn't use my name, and he was one of my regular readers actually. So we used to correspond just by email, talking about whatever issue I was blogging about or whatever, or in the comments. And then after one of the elections, I was attending a bit of a party in downtown Toronto with a bunch of other blogger friends, and I invited him to come. I said, "Why don't you come down? I'm inviting some of our local readers and some other bloggers, and we'll meet up and hang out, right?" And that was the second time I met him. But I still
Hmm.
didn't like. I didn't. It was 9 years later. I
Uh-huh.
didn't recognize him. He didn't recognize me at all, right? Like there was no context
Uh-huh.
from the previous meeting, so we didn't know each other.
Are you sure he didn't remember you? Because you don't seem like the type where you kind of like forget, you know?
I do leave an impression. It's true.
Yeah.
He's my husband never lies about anything. Like legit.
Uh-huh.
He'll tell you the
Yeah.
brutal honest truth. If you don't want the answer, don't ask him because he won't lie to you. So
Uh-huh.
when he tells me he didn't remember me, and to be honest, when I finally realized who he was and I revealed it to him, the look on his face when he realized who I was, it was obvious that he hadn't
Yeah.
put the
Two together.
yeah. So it's weird. It was a yeah, it was very cool. And actually, the weirdest part about it all was a little while after that, we were talking, and like when we met the second time, there was no intentions for us to get together. Like I was still on the last dregs of my crappy second marriage, and
Mm-hmm.
he was still with his wife, but like he was on the verge of leaving her already anyway, too.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, but we didn't intend ever to get together. That wasn't the context of our relationship at all.
Mm-hmm.
But after he realized who I was, like a week or two later, maybe, he said to me, I had to confess. And this was after he had already told his wife that he was leaving. He says, I have to confess, after that first time I met you at the wedding, it took a long time for me to stop thinking about you.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, wow. And
Yeah.
I wanted to say to him, I thought about you a lot too, but in a totally different way. I was, for years
Yeah.
after that, whenever I told the story about the kind of marriage I didn't want, it
Mm-hmm.
was their marriage
Mm-hmm.
from what I witnessed at that wedding. I thought that's the kind of stereotypical hen-pecked husband and
Mm-hmm.
hen-pecking wife. It was really brutal.
Yeah.
They'd only been married like 3 years at that time. He stayed with her for 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's brutal.
But he's the kind of guy who likes to keep his promises. Like
Right.
he has kids and doesn't like to give up easy and
Yeah.
doesn't like to go back on his
Those are
promises.
those are admirable traits to have in a husband. But when things go wrong, they can they can go to your detriment because you hang on longer than you should.
It's true, and I mean one of the things that he said after when we got together was meeting me, and not so much because he was attracted to me, but because the kind of personality that I have and the kind of outlook I have on life kind of revealed to him that he was, although he thought he was doing something good for his children by staying, he
Mm-hmm.
was actually cheating them because the truth was they were growing up without any kind of positive model for what a good relationship should be,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And they were growing up learning not to respect him,
Mm-hmm.
not to be able to trust their mother because she lied all the time, right? Like so he realized that he was actually not being a very good dad by staying because his children were not going to get to learn what it was like to actually be a good person
Mm-hmm.
and build a good life. So as hard as it's been, and we failed in many respects with our kids. Some
Mm-hmm.
of them didn't. It just didn't sink in properly. But one thing's for sure is they have no excuse that they didn't at least have the opportunity to see what it's like to have a good relationship because Mike
Mm-hmm.
and I always really um, made an effort to be like present with them all the time and always trying to model the kind of behavior that they should look for in their own partners. So
Mm-hmm. What was the difference for you though from the first marriage, second marriage to now, Mike? Because you know that's they're wildly different
they are.
men. Like like night and day. It doesn't begin to describe
Hmm.
the
Well, the
difference. So,
first one, uh, I don't know. I was 19 when I met him. He was 7 years older than me and European. So he had a
mm-hmm.
completely different mindset. He was very domineering.
Mm-hmm.
He was ended up being really physically abusive, and he cheated all the time. But like the cheating thing, all of his friends were like, "Oh, that's just what men do." They were European, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Eastern European. That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of their attitude a lot of times. So that was never something that I was willing to tolerate. So that led to a lot of conflict. Uh,
Is the initial attraction though just that you know like hey this is a real man and I'm you know you're 19 like you're physically you're a
I
woman
don't
but
think I
like
even had the
no
slightest clue what a real man looked like,
no
honestly. No. I I mean he was good looking
mm-hmm.
and he was willing to spend time with me. Like I had such a low value opinion of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And probably for a lot of good reasons in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
I was of the mindset a lot of girls grow up this way feeling like I'm going to go with whatever guy gives me attention because I don't think I'm worthy of it. So
Mm-hmm.
whoever lowers
Gives it
himself enough to be with me, I
mm-hmm.
should thank my lucky stars. And
Mm-hmm.
that's really, I think, the biggest reason that I went with him. The second one, he was so much more docile. He was very sweet and kind of relaxed. So he was almost a complete opposite of my first husband.
Okay.
But he also really liked to cheat on me.
Oh.
And he ended up being very passive aggressive. So the
Mhm.
passive part I keyed into at first, because at the time I was looking for somebody who wasn't going to punch me in the face,
Right.
right? Like,
Yeah.
so the
Yeah.
passive was a real, it was totally different. It was like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, this guy, I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
Sadly, his aggression was passive aggression, which is actually worse. I'd rather be punched in the face, to be honest.
Mhm.
So
It
that
was a
was
different type of
tough.
pain.
Yeah, and longer lasting, for
Uh-huh.
sure. And a lot harder to fight against, right?
Because
Like,
it was hidden.
well, you know, he would do things, and then when I'd get mad about it, he'd say, "Why are you always causing fights?" Right? Because
Mhm.
I get mad. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter that, he lied to me about something or
Mhm.
left something out. He was big about the omissions, right?
Uh-huh.
Omissions was a big thing for him.
Yeah.
But it was always my fault we were fighting because I started the fight, right?
Mhm.
And you can't really talk to somebody who's like that. They
Yeah.
just talk around subjects. But I'm very direct, right? Like I'm in your face direct about anything.
Mhm.
So it was difficult for me to
Were
handle
you always
that.
that way, Ginger, or did that kind of happen because of what you had been through with just up to that point in the first marriage?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know if your friends of this podcast are going to appreciate this comment, but the truth is I became a very direct person and a lot less apologetic for who I was by being a stripper.
Mhm.
Because up until that point, like all through high school and whatnot, um, I grew up in a house where you didn't mouth off,
Mhm.
like ever.
Mhm.
It was dire consequences if you did. So I kind of just, and don't get me wrong, I was rebellious, right? Like I wasn't, if you talk to my mom about it, I was like hell on wheels, but I don't think I was that bad.
Mhm.
But I usually kind of watched my P's and Q's for the most part, especially around adults.
Mhm.
Um, so it wasn't until I worked in a strip club that you had to be more assertive in a
Yeah.
place like that, right?
Yeah.
Like, or you were going to get walked all over or groped, right? Like,
Mhm. Yeah.
I got very good quality assertiveness training in a strip club.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like he had to, right? There, like that the actual like the actual Shark Tank,
Yeah.
right? Like you
Well, I
get
mean, the
eaten
truth
alive in
is,
there.
it's, well, because the men can be very aggressive too, right?
Mhm.
So, you can't sort of talk your way out of, pardon my French, but a blowjob
Mhm.
unless you flat out say, no, I'm not going to give you a blowjob, right? So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
get,
Yeah.
so that's the way it happened for me. It worked very well actually, because after that, it,
How old were you at that time? Were you married yet,
uh,
or was it the first marriage?
that was after I left my first husband.
Okay.
So, 21 roughly.
Oh, so that was a short marriage then, 2 years then.
Well, I was married to him for 4 years, but he was kind of out of the picture almost, yeah, almost after a year.
Uh
He
huh.
would travel a lot. He'd
Oh.
travel, so I never knew where he was.
Uh huh.
So we weren't really together for most of that time, and he wasn't paying any of the bills, so I had to figure out a way to do that.
Was
So,
that a hard decision to do that?
um, not overly. I've always been really comfortable with my
Mhm.
body, right?
Mhm.
Sexuality's never been one of those hang-ups that I have.
Mhm.
Um, it was mostly, I was mostly just worried about whether or not I was going to make a fool of myself because I'm also really clumsy.
Oh.
So I had to, the first time on stage, took quite a few drinks to get the courage up for it.
Uh huh.
Just because I was mostly worried about tripping and falling into the crowd. But
Uh huh.
that's happened. It happened a few times actually.
You fell.
I've had a
were
couple
the
pretty spectacular falls.
were the tips better that day or no?
You'd be surprised how gentlemanly men can be when something
Uh,
like that happens to them, right? Like
yeah.
for them, it's a mess too, right? This
Yeah.
woman
Yeah.
lands in their lap, they don't even know what to do.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, they were pretty good. My club was good. I was very particular about the clubs that I worked in. That
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want. There's a lot of dirty ones out there.
Seedy ones, you can tell. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I wasn't interested in any of that. I didn't want that kind
right.
of trouble, right?
Yeah,
So my club was pretty good. The gentlemen there they were, I don't know if high class is the word I could use for that, but
but
they were pretty wealthy. But they were the kind that showed up in a suit,
uh huh.
right?
Yeah,
So they had manners most of the time
for the most part, right? So, which is
for what it was.
what you would want.
Yeah.
Um, did you feel like you learned a lot? Like, because the assertiveness that actually comes across.
Mm-hmm.
What did you find that you learned other things that you're like, hey, I didn't expect to, of all the places, I think you can learn lessons anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
and
I learned how to make intelligent conversation.
really,
Oh yeah, I had a couple of regulars that never ever wanted me to dance. They wanted me to sit and have a drink with them and have a chat.
hmm,
And they paid me for that. They paid me to sit and just chat with them about all kinds of things. I learned all kinds of things from. Some of them were very intelligent people. Some of them were just sad, intelligent men who
mm-hmm,
didn't get attention at home, and they
mm-hmm,
were lonely, and they just
yeah,
wanted a nice conversation with a woman who didn't make them feel less, right?
small,
Yeah, it was kind of sad actually how
yeah,
often I came across men like that. I felt sorry for them, but also glad that I could be that for them, at least
something.
for now. Sure.
I've kind of thought that too. It's like, well, there is a need, right? Like men want to see pretty naked women. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's all men. Whether
Mm-hmm.
you're like me, I'm a Christian. Like all men
Yeah.
want to see pretty naked women. But like there's a part where it's like, hey, like I'm not being. Um, I, I think it comes down to it's again. Nobody wants to be alone, right? Like I don't like
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a crowd full of people and I'm all alone, or like I'm in my own house and my wife is talking disrespectfully to me. Like, I want to go somewhere where I can feel accepted. Like,
Yeah.
it's almost like Cheers, right? What was the draw of Cheers? It's like, well, yeah, like guys like enjoying to drink beer, but
Where
it's one
everybody
thing.
knows your name.
Everybody knows your name. Do you come in, Norm? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
like who doesn't like it when somebody sees you and is genuinely glad to see you, not because they have. Well, maybe not in this instance, but and like not because they have any kind of agenda. It's just like, hey, I just enjoy your company, right?
Yep.
Like that's really a nice thing to be like, I don't have any money to give to you. I can't do anything for you. You can't do anything for me. I
Mm-hmm.
just enjoy your company. There's something to be said that means so much to people, and that they're
Yeah.
willing to go into a strip club and pay somebody just so they can listen. Because you would think like, yeah, man, of course, like you're already paying for her to dance. Like, what is like, no, just sit. Like, how many times? Because that's what happens, right? They pay for a lap dance or whatever. You
Yep.
go away. It's like, hey, no, don't dance. Just sit and talk to me. Like, most people be like, dude, is he gay? Like, what? It's like, no. It's like, it's like no. Like, there's a genuine like you want
Yeah.
to have like a connection with somebody who they can see you, and be like, yeah, I see you and I enjoy you. Like, I'm opening myself because there is intimacy, right? Of like the sex, the nudity, that we consider that intimacy, but really it's like, hey, like this is the thing I'm really afraid of. I'm afraid
Yeah.
of being alone. Like that is really intimacy. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
people get that word has been, yes, that there is a sexual context to it, but more than anything is like people just want to be seen and
Mm-hmm.
and accepted.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And I did see that more often than I expected to be
Mhm.
honest. It was surprising often how much some men just craved the very little amount of attention they would get from me, right?
Mhm.
It's it told me a lot of things about what's lacking out
Mhm.
there for sure.
Mhm.
Because and I mean, some of them I think might have been drawn to me because I didn't play games or do any of those shenanigans. I mean, there were
Mhm.
girls in the club that would they do more than they were supposed to, right?
Mhm.
They kind
Mhm.
of blend the line with the law,
Yeah. Mhm.
right? But I was never one of those. I was always kind of just straightforward and I didn't play games. So I think the ones that were there more just for some intimate contact with somebody were they were drawn more to me because I guess because I it seemed more genuine to them. I really
Mhm.
was very genuine right? Like if I didn't like a gentleman the way he talked to me, I would just leave him. I would just walk
Mm-hmm.
away. But I don't care how much money you want to give to me, right? I'm not going to spend my time with
Right.
you if you're going to treat me like dirt. So,
Well, I mean, you're very authentic, and one of the things that comes across is that you do a very good job of affirming men. Like you have a way of affirming men that is very attractive, and I
mm,
think that's what it like. So if you're in a club full of women, it's like, well, yeah, you can show me your moneymaker, all that stuff, but it's like, well, they're all doing that here, and
yeah.
but you have a way of affirming, which I think I don't know what it is, but like you have it where it's like you know how to affirm, and that is very attractive. It's like, oh, like I can like I don't know what I don't know what that polarity, like I'm not that guy. I just know like, hey, like you know how to affirm a man, and that is attractive to men, and that comes across.
It's sometimes actually, it sometimes feels to me a little bit odd. And I've had this conversation on Twitter a couple times before, where, um, like I often see a lot of women will tweet out about the reasons that men are dirt or men are trash or all men are jerks or you know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
and I think I'll have conversations where I'll say, okay, so I think I had one tweet that went viral. I was surprised, but where I tweeted out like I had been molested twice before I was 10,
Mm-hmm.
and then I had n not a great relationship with my dad and a really abusive first husband and a generally abusive second husband. So I've had a whole lot of really bad experiences with men, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the kind that you expect make women bitter,
Mm-hmm.
right? Make women into those women that do nothing but bitch about how all men are trash.
Right.
But I'm not like that because I understand too that there's bad guys and there's good guys, right? Like I've also had experiences with a lot of really good, positive men. My grandfather, for whatever conflicts he had with my dad when he was growing up, he was always really kind of a positive role model for me.
Mm-hmm.
He was always a hard worker, always pretty genial, had good jokes. He
Mm-hmm.
was, you know what I mean? And a lot of other men that reached out to help me during some of those struggling hard times that I had with men. And I don't know, I guess I'm not like a lot of women kind of just let their pain and their trauma sort of blind them, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it becomes a veil over them, and they see everything through that lens. And I just decided, oh, I wasn't going to do that because those, the men that stole things from me, I couldn't stop them from stealing those things, but they weren't going to steal more,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I wasn't going to give them my life now, right? Like my
Yeah.
time now. So I can even talk about those. I can talk about those things and they don't even actually upset me anymore, really. Just because I decided, well, that happened to me and I had no control, but I can control how it makes me feel now.
Mm-hmm.
Not only about myself, but also about the men that I meet. So I just don't let that control the way I feel about men in general because just like I don't want to be lumped in with all women,
Yeah.
I'm not going to lump every man I see into that category.
Well, that's really powerful, and the realization though, it's like, hey, this happened in the past, but it's not going to control my future because
Hmm.
if it did, then it would, and then I think that you don't end up with Mike if that's if that if you're not able to
No,
get over that hurdle.
my husband is not the kind of man that would be with a woman who dwelled in a victim mindset. And don't get me wrong, right? Like, I don't want to trash girls that are stuck in that. I understand why women get trapped in that feeling
Mm-hmm.
because it's very difficult to get out
Mm-hmm.
of. I don't even feel like I have any special skills that got me out of it other than pure stubbornness, right? Like I was
Mm-hmm.
just determined that I was not going to let that ruin things for me. I made bad choices after, right? Like it did
Yeah. Yeah.
do a lot to ruin many aspects of my life. It took a long time to climb out from those mistakes.
Uh-huh.
But like I always proceeded with the attitude that no matter how many mistakes I was going to make, I was not going to let that control how I felt about things or how I felt about me. So
Well, the
he
thing
would not
with
be okay if I was like that. Like,
the thing with the victim, it's like, okay, this thing did happen,
Mm-hmm.
and it was not your fault. But the victim part is like, okay, like where do I go from there? And it's very understandable, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
terrible things have happened, and you have every right to be upset. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you can't take that away from it. You have every right to be upset. You can be upset and mourn and all those things that happened, but if you stay in the shoulda, coulda, woulda, it's like, well, now
That's a
what about your
choice.
future? Yeah, what about your future now? And you for yourself, but then like if you have children at the time, it's like, well, what about them now too? Like
Mm-hmm.
I need to get out. So I don't begrudge, like I've had a good, like I have nothing like that to complain about, and so I try to be very aware of that. Like I had a good life, and I was able to stay away from things that would have caused lots of heartache, but to be aware that, like, hey, that's not the case for everybody, because I can come off, especially when I was younger, I would come across very sharp and like, hey, if you didn't meet these this level, then no, you weren't it. But it's like, oh man, I came from a very good family. I really did.
Mm-hmm.
And I had nothing to do with that. Like that's just where I ended up. Like, luck of the draw. Like I had favor
Yeah.
and I got it, and that was it. Like I never had to deal with any of that. I had loving mom, aunties, uncles, tias, like all the whole thing. So that's why it's like, why am I pro family? It's like, well, I came from a good family. I saw
Mm-hmm.
what that was like. But I don't begrudge people who didn't have that and like can't see things, because sometimes, like, I think like you just like, how can you not see what's going on here, that you're trapped in here? It's like, well, I think that's kind of a gift, that where it's like, hey, I can see these things, and once you can kind of see it, it's like you can't unsee it, but they're still in that part where
Mm-hmm.
it's like, well, they still kind of have a veil over their eyes. They're not able to see in a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. There's two different kinds of people that get stuck like that. There's the people that just they don't know enough how to see out of it, and then there's people that use it
Mm.
as a shield for their own flaws, right? Like they
Mm-hmm.
decide it's too much work to improve myself, so I will use the things that happened to me as an excuse why I don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
There's a, sadly, I would probably say more than half of the people that I've ever met that have been in similar circumstances like that fall into that category, sadly, because it's rewarded these days, right? Like
Yes.
now there's clout in that.
Mm-hmm.
Like the
Mm-hmm.
fact that my tweet about being molested and being abused went viral, a lot of it was because there's clout in being a victim, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's that wasn't the purpose of the tweet,
No.
right? And
No.
I'm grateful that for the most part it didn't get received that way by a lot of people, but I
Yeah.
know that telling stories like that, there is a certain amount of clout in it, especially now in the way society's structured right now.
Well, it's funny, because I remember that tweet,
Mm?
but I forgot about it, because I don't, when I think of you, Ginger, I don't think of that,
Yeah.
right? And then so other people will be like, oh, these are the things this is my identity. These are the things that happened to me. And it's a constant reminder. It's like, I
Mm-hmm.
remember that. And I was like, oh, dang, Ginger, I might have said something, because it's like, it's a credit. It's a credit to you to be able to move past it. Like I like that's overcoming, and you hate that things happen to people. I hate that those things happen to you, but like
Mm.
that you overcame and you were able to grow, and that you have, like, I think of you. I think of Ginger, the overcomer, the person who loves Mike, who
Yeah.
loves on her kids, and like that's very positive. That smile right now that I see right now. That's how I think of you. I don't think of those things, because you don't live back there. Those things happened to you, but I don't live back there. That's
That's
not
right.
that's not me. That was something that happened to me, but it's not me. And I mean, in this conversation, I completely forgot that happened to you. Like I really, because it's not something that you bring
Well, if
up.
I could
But
ever impart to anybody who's suffering with that, the one thing that I think is the most important idea you need to embrace is it is a terrible place, right? Like those memories are awful. They're horrendous. They're a nightmare. Why would you want to live there?
mm-hmm,
Right? Like it's a choice to stay there.
mm-hmm,
And don't get me wrong, I'm not being flippant about how difficult it is to make the choice to get out of it. It
mm-hmm,
is hard. It's probably one of the hardest things I ever did,
Mm-hmm.
but it was so important. It took a long time. It took a long time. I remember I sat down, I guess when I was maybe 26 or 27 with my parents, and I brought up one of one of the instances of molestation from when I was 5, and I said, I'd really like to pursue charges or something against the person who did it to me. And I remembered his first name, but and I remembered where he was a babysitter of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, but I need information because I don't know his last name. And they told me they didn't remember.
Mm-hmm.
And that day was very hard for me because I thought to myself, if anything like that happened to my children, I would never forget that person's name.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I mean, to my parents' credit, it was probably really hard for them to put it in the past too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they probably didn't really want me to dredge all that up again.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of glad actually that I got stopped in my tracks at that time, that I couldn't pursue that like a mission, because I think if I had, I'd probably still be stuck there.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's interesting that because it's probably true, right? Like you
Hmm.
get what you focus on kind of expands, kind of thing, and it's like
It would have become a
now,
mission. And I
yeah.
know at one point if I'd tried that, the cops would have said there was statute of limitations or something, and then I would have felt further victimized, and
Mm-hmm.
like that need to feel like I could get some
The
justice for it
justice, yeah.
probably would have actually just made things way worse. So
Mm-hmm.
it ended up being a blessing for me that I got stopped in my tracks for that, because I at that point I had to say, okay, now you're gonna either give up on it,
Mm-hmm.
right, and move on, or we're stuck here, right? And I decided, well, okay, I'm just gonna move on.
Let me ask Ginger. Like, I'm a
Mm.
person of faith, and you would say what you would be like as an atheist, but like
Yeah,
not like the atheists how we would think.
the jerks. Yeah, I'm not a
Yes,
jerk.
no, not the jerks. But was there ever a time where you blamed God for the things that had happened to you?
No, I used to be really devout Christian. Actually, when I was a kid, I chose it. My parents didn't have any kind of faith at all. And there was a church in my town that I was really interested in going to. So I asked them, can't remember how old I was. I was young, single digits still, I think, if I
Mm-hmm.
could go to church.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually let me, which surprises me when I think back on it now, but they did. They were like, oh, sure, if you want to go to church.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually it was Episcopal. I can't remember what
Episcopalian.
kind of maybe. I
I don't
can't
know.
remember.
I'm
Yeah,
non-denominational, so I don't know the
I
denominations.
can't remember. Yeah, it sounds like it. But there was a youth group in there that was
Mm-hmm.
called the Crusaders, and I joined the youth group.
Uh-huh.
And I remember the motto. The motto for the Crusaders was Ephesians 6:13, which was wherefore say unto you the whole power of God, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all to stand. And I
Mm-hmm.
still remember it.
Yeah, you
So I
do.
like I was pretty religious for a long time actually. I've read the Bible a couple times,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of good lessons in the stories of the Bible. I have a lot of respect for Bible stories because and the rules, right? Like the Ten Commandments, say what you
Mm-hmm.
want. That those are good rules.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of the Jordan Peterson school of religion now, sort of,
Mm-hmm.
where I'm not practicing, but I have a lot of understanding and respect for what in the Bible and the stories of religion works for society. So I
Mm-hmm.
have that's probably why I'm a lot different from most atheists, is because like I have respect for the rules, and I have respect for people who practice that, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
don't care if you're a Christian or atheist. If you're a good person, you don't cheat, you don't lie, you don't steal, right? You
Mm-hmm.
don't cheat on your wife,
Yeah.
then you're fine with me. That's what I want, right? And I don't care how you got there. I only care how you act.
Yeah.
So,
And so how has it been? Because to me, Canada is a very secular
hmm,
country, right? Like here in
it really
America, for the
is.
most part, I think, depending on where you are, like where I'm at, I would think that most people are Christians, but in the city, not so much.
Mm-hmm.
But um, how has that impacted your faith at all, like being in Canada now, and like all like the restrictions that are going on now, where it's like, hey, because to me, like I think like all the stories, like I'm like the Bible is true from beginning to end, and then all the rules, like I don't know all the rules, like I'm no theologian. To me it's just like,
Yeah.
hey, it's true, and I can see it's true because I can see it around me. I've seen miracles, I've seen people change, like all those things. It's like, oh, you can't tell me no. But I've seen in the places where there is a lack of faith, that it's like, hey, things seem to go haywire here. And the people who, like, to me, the one of the big things is, the Hebrews being freed. Like that's like one of the greatest liberty stories. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like when churches are closed, it's like, well, why do they want them closed? Like, well, you're telling a story of liberty here,
Mm-hmm.
and now this is something that is being hushed. It got to the point because there was a pastor over there who's been arrested a few times for having church
Yes, a
services,
couple
right?
actually. One out east and one in Alberta.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And so, like, to me that's crazy, because I've been going to church since we had shutdowns here for like a month or two,
Mm-hmm.
and then they opened back up, but some of them had restrictions, but the one I went had no restrictions, and it was just great. Like, we talked about music, it was like I've been going to concerts twice a week because our church has great worship music. So, like, to me, it's
Uh-huh.
like I get the joy and the fulfillment that comes with all of that. But in Canada, like, they're not letting you guys even meet, which is crazy.
Well, I mean, I don't go to church, so it hasn't personally affected me, but I have a really I'm like worse than your worst Texan for my attitude about government and individualism, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm absolutely that person that would take an axe into the woods and vanish and
Mm-hmm.
just be happy to live
Mm-hmm.
there and
Leave me
build an
alone.
armed compound,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for me to even grow up in this country is like I feel like an alien on this planet sometimes. Just it's not so much the attack on religion, and it's important, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
attack on religion
Mm-hmm.
is a bad thing, and I know that the reason is because all things need to be subjugated to the state
Mm-hmm.
in this country, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very powerful drive to do that. And the church right now is where that gets halted the most still
Mm-hmm.
for what it is, right? Not the
Mm-hmm.
church doesn't have a lot of control up here, that's for sure. But it's to stamp out any objectors, right?
Set.
Like
Yeah.
we have a saying in our house we like to use a lot. It's pour encourager les autres, right? And that's and as an example to the others, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they clamp down hard on the preacher that's the loudest because
Mm-hmm.
they need to make an example of him,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whether
Mm-hmm.
you agree with his methods or his reasoning or whatever, right? That's not the point. The
Mm-hmm.
point is the loudest voices have to get stomped the hardest because
Yeah.
otherwise you're that you get the ants rise up against the grasshoppers, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you got to stamp them down hard so they still just do their drone work.
Have you thought of going to church for pure rebellion?
No. No,
No.
just because I have enough respect for my religious friends that I like it would be disrespectful. Like
Uh,
I have been to church a couple times for various reasons. Like Mike's eldest daughter was in the church choir in her mom's church,
uh-huh.
and for some of her performances we would go to support her, right? But
Uh-huh.
for the most part, like I'm not gonna go. I don't believe, so I'm not gonna go to
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
church. It's
Although
hypocritical to do that.
if you make it over here, though, I'll take you though.
Oh, I do like the worship music.
You'd love it. You really would.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
especially if you haven't been to a concert for a while, it's really nice.
No,
Yeah.
no. Well, I have a problem with people. I don't like
Yeah.
people. Crowds.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't really like concerts, but I like our church because churches, because it's like you have your seating and like you have space
Yeah.
still, so it's not like you're on top of each other. But I think it was like Guns N' Roses had come like 2 or 3 years ago. They were like on a what do they call it, reunion tour, or
Yeah, something like
they've
that.
been on, and so they were at the stadium here, and like people had posted on Facebook, and like people had their lighters out instead of their phones, and I was like, oh, that was pretty cool, because it's just like, take
Wow,
it
who
back.
still
Yeah.
carries a lighter?
Well, they took it to the concert for that reason. I think they were
The
like, all of the same mind. It was like, hey, let's
the
bring our
question there
lighters.
is, did Axl Rose actually show up?
I think
Because
he
that's always
did.
the question.
I think he did. Yeah, I think he did.
He has a reputation.
Yeah. Well, he's been partying hard for how long now?
Mm. Oh, I'm old enough to remember when they first came out. So that
Me too.
was
Well,
really?
I don't know if how they first came out,
You're
but they
not as
were.
old as me. I'm
I'm almost
48.
I'm almost 40.
Oh, see. No, I had their first album.
Oh, you did?
Well, on
I
cassette.
was Appetite for Destruction? Is that what
Yeah,
was that it?
I
Yeah.
believe so. Yeah.
I was thinking about cassettes the other day. Yesterday, actually, I was like, how cool what if I got my podcast and I turned them into like cassettes, and it would be like, like the most original thing. Like you have to listen to this on a cassette. Like big government is not going to get to my Walkman and cassettes. Like,
My husband still
like,
has a rather large collection of cassettes. We actually had
does
to
he?
go out and buy a little mini player for them to take with us when we moved because he wants to still be able to listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard to get those now. It's hard to get a
How
cassette
does it
player.
sound on there? Does it sound like
Sounds
not
pretty
very good?
good.
Yeah.
They're not great, right? Like cassettes, he has albums too,
Mm-hmm.
and he prefers the sound on those.
Yeah.
But no, there's still some that he couldn't get now, right? Like he has some
Yeah.
that he couldn't get now, so he's not willing to give those up.
Yeah, I think there's been like for a while now, people buy vinyl, and that's kind of been a
Hmm.
renaissance that's kind of been going for a while. And it's like I wonder why it didn't go to cassettes, but I guess maybe because they
Yeah, the
make a
sound
mess
quality's
and they
not as
could cut,
good.
yeah, which is funny, right? Because the cassettes were a step up from vinyl
I
originally.
I think they just were more convenient because you can't take a record in a Walkman, right?
That's true, and you can't put it in the car.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that was
So,
probably it, the convenience
mm-hmm.
part of it. But I remember, I think the first tape I ever bought, I think was a Belle Biv DeVoe tape. I think that's what my first tape.
Oh
E-
wow!
Either that or MC Hammer. It
I
might have
think
been
my
MC
first one
Hammer.
was Samantha Fox.
I don't know who that is.
Yeah,
Is she
see, because
Canadian?
I'm old.
Is
No,
she Canadian?
no, but she's very hot.
Oh
Or
yeah.
she was. She was at the time. I don't know what she looks like now.
Well, it's been a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And then one of the last things I wanted to, so going back to like the Bible stuff is that you had,
Hmm.
I always wondered where you came up with this. So the Cain complex, this is one of like your original tweets. It might have been how I might have found you in the first place, was
Oh.
because somebody had tweeted something and it was like social justice warrior, like I hate you for whatever. And you're like, this is the Cain complex. And I was like, how did you, because I think I might have known that you were an atheist. And I was
Yeah.
like, wow, how did you put that together? Because like I don't know what your experiences were
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
anything, but I was like, wow, that is a super insightful, like you saw that
Thank
and
you.
like you saw right through that. And I was like, wow, that is and like I mean like I didn't even put it together. And when I thought about it, I was like, wow, you really put that together, because this is really what was going on.
Hmm.
Cain was hated Abel because he was not bringing the offerings, and he did not want to bring up his offering to the standard that Abel did. So instead of bringing up his standard, he kills his brother, which is
But
like
he
I
hates
was
his
like,
brother because he's what he can't be or won't
mm-hmm.
be, right?
He's not willing to be right.
Yeah. So, and I mean, that's so common now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of made the Cain complex, I made that up, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it was a good shorthand. If you knew anything about the story of Cain and Abel, it was a good shorthand for what you were dealing with, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's literally what the story was about. It's about, like, he didn't just hate his brother, he hated him for his virtues.
Mm-hmm.
Really, his brother didn't earn his hate because he was a jerk or because he was selfish or, you know what I mean, not acting like a good brother. He hated him for the things that he should have loved him for
Mm-hmm.
because it shone a light on where he was lacking. And in bitterness, instead of taking that as an opportunity to make improvements on himself and his own character, he decided that the best way to deal with that problem is to eliminate it, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
it's even worse when, like, it happens a lot now in society. They don't just take the person out, they muddy them first,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Yeah.
they strip them bare and tar them first so that when they go down, nobody even misses them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you think, oh God, I'm so grateful you saved us from this wretch. And it's really probably one of the most despicable things a person could ever do, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Well,
Because
I think
it doesn't
I
just
think they
take out something good,
yeah.
it takes it out in a very malevolent way.
Well, I think that's what they tried to do with Jordan Peterson, right? They were trying to
Yeah.
muddy him up. They were trying to accuse him of being
Mm-hmm.
like a racist or like, some crazy, crazy person. Because it's like, here's this guy who is promoting virtues and
Mm-hmm.
talking about, seeing the Bible in new ways and, hey, you shouldn't disregard it and, all these things and telling men to, clean their rooms is what he would say to like like it's like whoa, like these are all things that you would hope would be promoted, but then it was like no, we're going to try and muddy him up. And I think he did actually kind of stumble, right? Like he had some
Yeah.
issues, but it was like, man, his wife is going through cancer and all this stuff. It's like when he was gone, it's like, oh, we've muddied him up. But it seems like that's like one of like the perfect example. I don't know if he's kind of succumbed to that. He hasn't been as
He's coming
what's
out
the
swinging these days.
oh, has he?
He's got quite a few things going on. He's done quite a few podcasts. I'm a huge Jordan Peterson fan.
Uh-huh.
We've Mike and I have been to several of his biblical lectures,
Uh-huh.
and actually, oddly enough, for somebody who's an atheist, one of my favorite things, I wouldn't say favorite, one of the most common things for me to do during times when I have real struggle, and there are days when it feels like the world is crashing in on me. When
Mm-hmm.
I have those struggling days, I always put on the YouTube video of his discussion about Noah building the ark.
Mm-hmm.
Because the way he breaks down that story and the whole idea of that story kind of it recenters me somewhat, right? Like you
Mm-hmm.
build the ark so that you can survive the flood because you're not
Mm-hmm.
going to avoid the flood. It's
Mm-hmm.
coming,
It's coming.
whether you like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
You got to take care of your business so that when it comes, you're floating instead of sinking, right?
Well,
So you
the
take
thing,
care of your business.
well, the thing was too is, it was 100-year period from when he gets the word to build the ark, and he actually builds the ark. So for 100 years, he's building that thing, but he's also letting people know, like, hey, this thing is coming, and nobody listened.
Starting
Nobody
to feel
listened.
real relevant these days, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It's like, hey, this thing is coming, and they would, because at that point there had been no rain, and so it's
Mm-hmm.
like, what are you talking about? Like there was no reason, right? Like that's the thing. That's like, we've made, if you want to say government is a god, but reason is a god too, and there's reason is a tool. Like I'm not against reason, but it's not
Mm-hmm.
it's not everything. Like, people try to make that be everything. So at that point there had been no reason to, and we see now there's reasons for shutdowns. Like, hey, here's this reason for it. It's like, well, no, like
The
there's
reason has to
this
make sense.
yeah, it has to make sense. It has to, and at least at that time, I guess you can't blame them, right? There had been no rain up in that; they'd never seen it,
Mm.
so it made no sense. But now it's like you can see, like, hey, we've read history books. Governments don't give back the power once they've taken it. Like we've seen that, and you're giving them more and more. Like we
Mm-hmm.
went from we went from. I have never seen the goalposts move so fast in such a
Me
hurry,
either.
and nobody says boo. Like we went from 2 weeks to slow the spread, if you remember. It's been
Mm-hmm.
a long 2 weeks.
It's
And
bad
am I and
here. It's
and
really bad here.
how have you dealt with that being there? I mean, is it just like, your home is your sanctuary?
I'm
Because that's how I
angry a
feel too.
lot.
Are you? Yeah.
I have to confess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I'm angry a lot.
Mhm.
Like, we're making our preparations as much as we can to insulate ourselves from as much of it as we can. I mean, the good thing we have is we kind of built our life around us. So, and my husband, like I said, is very stoic. He's very kind of, he's, he doesn't let things bother him. So
Mhm.
I'm the one that gets really agitated about it because I
Mhm.
don't like infringements on my freedom at all. And I'm not an
Mhm.
unreasonable person, right? Like I'm not a crazy person who just says no for the sake of saying no, right?
Mhm.
Like I'm generally healthy and a little bit concerned about the way things are going and just want to see, right? Like, I just want to bide my time a little. It's not like we're saying, no, I'm never going to get the vaccination because I hate everything the government does.
Mhm.
I have some concerns and there's not an overwhelming need for me to get it right now. Um, and to have my freedoms infringed upon for that, right? Like, and it's not even just that they're infringing on my freedoms, they're vilifying me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like especially during the election we just had, the prime minister said all kinds of terrible things. Like we weren't even worthy of being citizens, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
he was treating us like we were monsters. I don't even know how that kind of rhetoric gets past people, and they think that that sounds just fine, but you're seeing it everywhere, right? Like we're
Mm-hmm.
on Twitter and we see the way people talk to each other now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my husband's father will not see him anymore.
Ugh.
He's got cancer and he probably doesn't have a lot of time left, but because Mike isn't vaccinated, he refuses to see him.
Oh, that's brutal.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And that was hard for him, but I mean, his attitude about it was, I'm not making medical choices to assuage my father's unreasonable fear,
Yeah.
right? If he thinks the vaccine works so well, he has it. He shouldn't be afraid of me,
Yeah.
right? Like, my parents don't agree with our choice. His mother doesn't agree with our choice, but they still visit, right?
Yeah.
Like, they've decided that's up to us. We don't talk about it, right? It's not a topic of conversation because we don't want to fight about it. But they at least respect our choice, and it doesn't affect our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
And that's
something I have
key,
a lot of
right?
respect for my
Yeah.
parents and his mom because of that.
Man, it's brutal though. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is that the more you watch the news, like the people who really like take in the news, like they
Hmm.
are like they have taken it in.
Yeah, and don't
And
get me wrong, his dad is sick, and so he has to be careful. I
right,
understand, but his choice doesn't have any rationality to it.
bearing on, yeah.
And I mean, like I said, my parents and his mother visit all the time, and we haven't killed any of them yet.
No, not yet.
My
Which I think,
son um, really didn't want to get it, but his workplace mandated it.
oh,
So he has a heart condition, so I was really worried when he told me that he was gonna get it because he couldn't afford to lose his job. He
uh,
just couldn't. His girlfriend has a lot of health problems and she couldn't work. So he was the
mm-hmm.
only person paying their bills. So he
Yeah,
got it, but he didn't like it. And
no,
I still worry about him. Like he's not out of the woods for sure. Who knows in 5 years what to expect from that?
what exactly? But that's so tough, right? That's really where the coercion comes in. It's like you can't work unless you have this. It's like what the hell? Like what? Where?
Well, my husband has a choice as of January 17th because
Mm,
his office also mandated it.
yeah, that's
So,
crazy. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
I can't. And I mean, I have some buddies that I talk to, and so like when everything was going on, it's like, hey, are you seeing this? It's like, yeah, I'm seeing this. It's like, okay, I'm not crazy. And then the people that we kind of interact with on Twitter, it's like, oh, okay, like I'm not crazy because I also don't watch the news. So it's just like, what are you talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Like I
Well,
won't.
Mike has a biology degree, right? Like it's just general biology, so he's like not into immunology or
Mm-hmm.
virology, right? But a general biology degree, so he's familiar with the scientific method.
Mm-hmm.
He's familiar with a general knowledge of the way these things work, and he sees things that alarm him
Mm-hmm.
about the whole process. And even
Mm-hmm.
your average person that doesn't have a biology degree, if they think about it,
Yeah.
like, why don't you have questions at least?
Yeah.
Like the way that they're doing this, why don't you at least have questions, even if you don't agree with where the questions lead me to surmise? So don't you even have questions at all? I've read
Yeah.
history.
Yeah.
I've
That's not
never
good.
seen the government act as a good actor. They just
Mm-hmm.
don't. Some of them are malevolent, right? Some
Mm-hmm.
of them are just incompetent.
Right.
Some of them are well-meaning, but they're being led by the malevolent ones. It doesn't need to be a grand conspiracy of thousands of people all conspiring. It needs to be a couple of very well-placed
Mm-hmm.
malevolent actors who have a lot of influence, and then thousands of people who just don't want to be caught being wrong
Yeah.
that go along
Yeah.
with the malevolent actors
And
because they believe they know what they're doing.
or they just want to be left alone, right? Like nobody wants to stick out and stand out. So it's like,
Yeah.
hey, leave
So
me
you
alone.
have a pile of
Which
world
I.
leaders that just don't want to be the country that's in the red headlines, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they make the same choices because they don't want to be wrong.
Well, you don't want to be a red headline, especially when red you can make whatever you want red. Like, it's like, wait a minute, because I remember at the beginning of this, there was like this study that had come out, and it was like not the study, but there was like it had gone around, and it was, if we don't do something about this, there's millions of people who are gonna die. And there was a study that was the basis for all of this,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like nobody's mentioned that we're not even close to the number that they had predicted. It's not even a fraction of what they had predicted, but here we still are, because it was like,
Mm-hmm.
I could. They were there. The setup was there, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, they were just running the play. And I've seen this before. I've saw the headlines for bird flu, swine flu, all this stuff, and now here it is, and now they know what they're doing.
Well, one of those things that alarms me is I remember not that long ago, a few years ago, when there was an outbreak of Ebola somewhere in the States,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't do this for Ebola.
Mm-mm.
Like, wait a second. That one makes you bleed from your eyes within
Yeah.
like 3 days.
Yeah.
But we didn't lock the whole country down for
No.
that. So why? Right?
Well,
Like,
the same
why
thing
does it
with
make sense now?
H1N1 in
Mm.
like 2011 or 12. Kids died from that one.
Yeah, well,
They didn't do it.
I was an adult with kids when SARS was out, and
Mm-hmm.
there they locked down a whole pile of stuff in Canada when that first hit. It wasn't the same though, right? Like they canceled public things, and the hospitals were restricting access. I remember because my previous husband had his appendix out during that, and it was really difficult to get in and out of the
Mm-hmm.
hospital to see him during that time. But it still wasn't even nearly as bad as they're doing now.
Mm-hmm.
And that one still didn't become the huge.
No.
We moved on within a couple of years. Everything was back to normal again,
Right.
right? And it ended up not being as big as they thought it was. So, I mean, even if they genuinely thought it was going to blow up into something huge, well, now I mean, I keep saying to people, I don't take precautions. I wear my mask into stores where I have to because I don't want to have fights. Like my grocery store, it's a very small town we live in, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know all the people that work there, and I know this is their job, right? I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
give them a hard time. I'm not going to fight with them. I don't want, it's not their fault because our government will shut them down if they don't do this. So I'm just going to put my mask on and go in because I don't want to have that fight with the 80-year-old lady at the cashier. But other than that, like I never did the sanitizing. I don't wash my
Mm-hmm.
hands incessantly, right? Like I was never careful. And in 2 years, I still haven't managed to get this disease, right? I'm thinking, how big a pandemic is this if
You know what you need to do? You need to go to the Walmart DVD bin, put your hand in there, and then
Joel,
you
I've
get
done
like.
it. Done it. That's where I get all my good DVDs. That was the $3 bin.
I'm gonna get you sucker for $3. I already have it. I'm getting it.
Oh, I don't have it.
You don't?
I don't have that one. I
Oh
haven't been able to
no.
find it anywhere. But it's
Mm.
okay because I mostly have the whole movie memorized.
Oh, okay. That's disappointing that you don't have that. I'll see
I
if I
know.
can
I
fix
have
that
been
for you.
looking, but it's hard. Yeah, I can't find it. Can't
Yeah,
find it.
that's one of my favorite things about you. It's like the references to "I'm gonna get you sucker." It's like tag Ginger. Here it is,
You have
Ginger. Here we
no
go.
idea how
Yeah.
excited I was when I discovered somebody else who knew this movie and liked it. My husband really doesn't like it. And most people I know have never seen it, right? Like
Mm,
my group of friends growing up when I was a teenager, this was like, it was like the movie for us.
mhm.
Me
Mhm.
and all my friends, we all knew this. We'd watch it
Yeah.
incessantly and just pass the lines back and forth between each other. But then once I became like an adult
Yeah.
with kids and
Grown
that,
up.
is like I couldn't meet a single other adult who'd ever watched this movie, and they certainly would have rolled their eyes and thought I was crazy for liking it.
Well, I have the sense of humor of a 12-year-old boy, so I mean,
Me too.
yeah.
My husband, for all of his hate on the "I'm Gonna Get You Sucker," still I think has his Weird Al Yankovic album on vinyl.
Oh, no way.
It was the first album he ever bought with his own money.
Of course. Of
Yeah.
course.
So this is one of the reasons I can be sweet to him because
Mhm.
he has an odd sense of humor,
Mhm.
and I don't always get it, but sometimes I get it, and he always gets my jokes, even if he doesn't think they're funny.
Yeah, he's there for you.
Yeah.
Well, Ginger, we're coming up on time here.
Hmm.
You can find Ginger on Twitter at Handy Ginger Girl, Ginger Gal, and on YouTube, A Ginger in the Wild, and Play It Again with Mike and Ginger. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for inviting me. It's nice to have a mature conversation.
Yeah,
I don't get
because
those
it's not
very
the same on
often.
Twitter.
No, those conversations are good, but like in real life, it's not very
uh,
often I get to talk about these things.
yeah, which is why I really enjoy this quiz because it's like, hey, like-minded people for general, like, hey, leave me alone. I want to be free. I'm a free man. I'm
Yeah,
grown. Leave me alone. How about we start there, and then let's joke about I'm gonna get you, sucker.
for sure.
Well, thanks so much for coming on, Ginger. This has been the Rigi Keys podcast. Enjoy the episode and see you next time.